two parts. Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today, part two and the conclusion of the holster for your screw gun to keep by your side. Again, I came up with this because I get sick and tired of hunting for my screw gun where I used it, laid it down, then I got to go back and forth picking it up, finding it. So I'm going to make it where I can wear this on my side, have my screw gun with me all the time, even climbing up and down the ladder, make it much safer. So I've got my chrome tan leather here. Again, this I got from Kentucky Leather and Hides. You can check them out at KentuckyLeatherandHides.com. So I've got my pattern that we made in part one of the video. Now I'm going to apply this to my leather, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and finish this project up. So come on in and let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is see where I want to take this leather from. This side over here has got a lot of scarring on it. The center is pretty good. This end would work, but it gets a little thinner down here right on this corner. So, and it's got a neat scar on it too. So I think what I'm going to do is, let's see where this, this is going to lay out to where this corner that I said was a little thinner, it's not going to affect that. So I want to, this is the unfinished side, I want to flip this over to the finished side and just transfer my pattern over here. And I've got that marked. We marked it on the last video when we made the pattern. So I'm going to mark this side. The other side's marked unfinished. I'm going to put finished side, just in case I use that in the future. And I'm going to make it to where I get rid of the scar even. So I'm just going to slide it down a little bit. And then trace my pattern onto the leather, and I am using a ballpoint pen. You can use whatever your preference is. Pencil, scribe, pen, marker, whatever. I prefer a ballpoint pen, a fine line, just because it makes it real easy to transfer from a pattern to the leather. And I always cut that off or bevel it off or whatever anyway. So in this case it probably won't matter because of what it is. I will go ahead, I have all my holes pre-punched in my pattern for my rivets, as obviously you don't want this moving at all when you're transferring these holes in this pattern. So I am making sure I really hold that down nice and snug so it doesn't move. I'm still looking at the outside pattern lines, making sure that they have not moved. And I've got all my holes marked, and I've got my pattern drawn on there. So I don't know how well you can, you can see those pretty good. Got all my holes marked, my pattern lines. Next thing I want to do is make sure I have a good sharp blade in my knife. I'm going to go ahead, and this is, probably around, I'm going to say 8 ounce leather. It cuts really nice. And again, Kentucky Leather and Hides has all kinds of leather. They have veg tan, they have chrome tan, they have Exotics. So you ought to go check them out. I'm going to go ahead and do this edge right here so I can get rid of this excess leather I have over here. That could end up cause me a problem because I like to keep turning my leather as I cut it. So I don't get in an uncomfortable position. And I am cutting this on a self-healing mat. So that will get that big piece out of the way. That way I can turn this the direction I need to keep it where it's much more comfortable for me to cut. I don't like to move my body or my cutting position when I'm cutting out leather. I'd much rather move my leather piece and I go back, trim these areas up. Here's my radius that I put in there. And you can cut those radiuses however you're comfortable with. Most of the time, it's easier for me, especially on a small radius, just to cut it as a square and then come back and make several shortcuts or small cuts around that radius. I feel like I have a lot more control that way. On my cuts. Now, this is the piece that goes back like so. That'll be for my belt loop. Then here's the holster part. So this will give you an idea what it's going to look like. Again, pretty simple, not a lot of leather. You don't have to use a super heavy piece of leather. And I'm going to mark on this while we've got it out. I'm just going to put cordless drill. That way I can keep this in my patterns, and if somebody else wants one, I'll have it handy. I won't have to go back through that. So you get yourself a little library set up of patterns, and then you can go just pick them out as people want certain things. I'll take my punch for my rivets, and I can start punching my holes as I marked and transferred those to my leather from my pattern. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on finishing this or beveling it, or it's just a real quick project, something utilitarian so I can actually use it, and it's going to be thrown around in my toolbox, the back of my truck. So it's not something that like a showpiece for a nice handgun or anything. Alright, there's all my holes. Now I can go ahead and get my hardware out. And I'm going to use these, I believe they're 5/16 rivets. There's 3, 4. My belt loop, that's what I'm going to do first. So let's go ahead and I'll do the middle one. Stick it through the back. Get me an anvil here and a setter. Put my cap on. There's my first rivet. So at that point I can go ahead and move to my second one. Do these 3 before I move on, because it'd be much harder to get to these if you did them after you did the holster part. So you want to make sure that you kind of think that through so that you get the right rivets in the right order, so it makes it easier on you when you're installing them. So there's all 3 of those. There's the front, there's the back, and that gives me, again, I should have at least a 2-inch space, and I do. I have a 2-inch space for my belt. So if I'm using a 1.5 or a 2-inch belt, that'll work. Get my next rivets and go ahead and start them. And again, I'm going to start it in the middle hole, and that'll kind of keep that nice and together as I put my other rivets in. And then I'll work my way from the center out. Doesn't matter right or left, but I'll work from the center out. I'll go right this time. I'll go left from center. And what that's going to do is keep my center of the holster there, keep it nice and lined up. The reason I keep grabbing more rivets is to make sure I have enough caps, because when I grab them out of that hardware box, I always grab, for some reason they're smaller, so I always grab more rivets than I do caps. And then I can go to the last one on the very tip and get one more cap. And there's my 5 rivets for the holster itself. I can put my hardware up. Put my polyboard away, and there's my holster. No stitching, quick hardware rivets. It's going to last. Those rivets will hold that, but probably the leather will wear out first. Check the fit, and it fits great. Look at that. The end doesn't stick out. Now, if I have a bit on it or something that I want to keep on there, it's going to stick out. But that's okay. That's going to keep that nice and close. Easy to put in and out. It's not going to fall out if that's on your belt. Notice this part comes up high enough to protect it and keep it from falling out. So it's going to keep it nice and snug on your side and easy in and out. Going to make my life much easier. Alright, so there's another project complete. Thanks for coming back and seeing part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, where we actually made the pattern for this, go check it out. It would be the video before this one. Nice, easy, quick project. It's going to make a nice addition to my toolbox. Very nice and easy. Okay, appreciate you coming along and watching, and come back next week to see what we got in store. And as I always say, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.